Alright, so the next couple of videos, what we're going to be doing is a couple small things here and there, fixing up some values, tweaking some things, and adding a couple features in preparation of setting up our live services. And once we get all that done, then we will move on to our more exciting main activity and message activities, which will basically wrap up the UI for us. So if you guys are more than welcome to check the Git repository and see what exactly has changed. Little things here and there, but I just want to consolidate all these tiny little changes into a set of self-contained videos. So if you guys just want to skip ahead, check out the source control, then you could do that as well. Anyway, the first thing I want to do is I haven't shown you guys actually how to do this. It's really straightforward, but what I want to do is I want the message activity, the new message activity that displays the camera, to not be able to rotate. I want it to be stuck into portrait mode. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to locate inside of my Android manifest, I'm going to locate the new message activity, and I'm going to go ahead and say Android screen orientation and say portrait. I really just wanted to show you guys that you can lock screen orientation on a per activity basis. I think that's a potentially very useful tool, especially for these kinds of apps. And I also just was thinking that because acquiring the camera takes a couple seconds, blah, 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 it might be a little nicer to not recreate the activity every time the device is rotated. There's also another way to do that as well, but we talked about that earlier in our activity lifecycle video. Alright, the next thing I want to do is I want to change the JPEG compression and max image height for our new and send message activities. So this is just an optimization. I turned out not being happy with how large the images were that I was capturing them when I was doing testing on a real device that actually was taking real pictures as opposed to the Getty Motion emulator thing. I wasn't happy with the size of them, so I decided to compromise a little bit on the quality of the images. So I'm going to come down here to my new message activity, and I'm going to locate the code that gets executed when you take a picture. So it's this override right here, on picture taken, which if you recall is provided to us or required for us to implement because of the camera.picture callback interface. And what I'm going to do down here is I'm going to locate the code that compresses the bitmap, and that's right here. I'm going to change the quality from 100 to 70. Then I'm also going to jump into my send message activity. So I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to change the max image height from 1280 to 1000. So we'll get that changed. All right, next up is something that I overlooked, and that's the profile activity. I never loaded in the avatar into the profile activity. So let's go ahead and do that. Basically, that just means I'm going to, right after I set the title in the onYou'reCreate of the profile activity, right after I set the title here, I'm going to, right there, I'm going to say Picasso with this for the context .load user.get avatar URL into our avatar. So our avatar view is the name of that parameter. I also want to make sure that I update this when my details are updated for my user, and I can do that down here on this other method, this onUserDetailsUpdated, which if you recall is the method that's listening to the userDetailsUpdated event. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say Picasso with this load event.user.getAvatarURL into avatar view. You can also, if you want to, cache the Picasso.with, maybe in the application class as well. You can do that by building your own Picasso, or you could just do repeat Picasso with every time you need it. Either way works. So now let's go ahead and do the same thing on our nav drawer. So I'm going to open up my views package and open up my main nav drawer. If you recall, our main nav drawer is the guy that, I'll just show you guys, has this guy up here with my name and my avatar. Well, I didn't put in the avatar code in yet here either. So let's go ahead and do that. I did helpfully put in those to-dos there so we know exactly where to go in the code. But if you didn't, it's going to be under the constructor of your main nav drawer after we alias out the logged in user into a local variable. So I'm going to simply say Picasso with, and for the context, I'm going to pass an activity because activities are context. And I'm going to say .load logged in user.get avatar URL into avatar image. And then I'm basically going to do the same thing down here on the onUserDetailsUpdated. So if you recall, our main navdrawer object gets to listen in to all of our awesome events as well. So I'm going to say Picasso with activity.load. In this case, I do event.user.getAvatar URL into avatar view, or avatar image. All right. So I guess now it's a matter of testing to make sure that that's all loading in correctly. So let's go ahead and hit play. And while it's building, I'm going to refresh my memory on exactly what dummy avatar that I used for that. Just make sure, because I want to make sure that I actually set a gravatar. Yeah, I did. Okay. So I should be getting a nice little identicon for my avatar. And I do. Check that out. How I open up my nav drawer, and there's that guy right there. And if I jump into profile, you'll see that our identicon is also placed in there. So yeah, those are the first set of little minor UI tweaks I wanted to put together. The next thing I really want to do is fix some bugs. Just a couple parts where I didn't wrap event handlers in the appropriate scheduler method call, for example, as well as some other sort of kind of race conditions that I started to see happen to appear when I'm using a live service. And I want to address all those just really quickly. It'll tighten up the user interface a little bit and prevent some crashes. So the first thing is there's a critical bug inside of my base dialog. So if we open up the base dialog fragment, you'll notice that in nowhere inside of this fragment have we instantiated the scheduler. So now if you try to access a scheduler from the dialog fragment, it'll crash. And so we want to make sure that we do that. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to say scheduler equals new action scheduler. And then passing in application for the application. Maybe do that even before we register ourselves with the bus. The reason I want to do that is because when you register yourself with the bus, your producers get fired. And if your producers get fired, but you haven't instantiated a critical component of your class, then that could open up the potential for issues. So next up, let's go ahead and jump into the contacts fragment. So I'm going to go over here. And what I want to do here is change my code just a tad to prevent there from being a potentially app crashing bug. So what I want to do is right here, after we make our progress frame go away, I am going to take this code up here, this response.showErrorToast, and yank it. So I'm going to select it and hit Control X. And then after we set the progress frame to animate, I'm going to say, if not, response did succeed, response show error text, and then return. So what I'm doing here is I'm making it so that we don't invoke the adapter.addAll method if the response did not succeed, but we do make sure that we both show the error toast and we animate the progress frame away. So if there was, like, for example, difficulty contacting the servers, the contacts array here, the contacts list might be null, and invoking addAll with a null list will throw an exception. So we need to make sure that we protect ourselves against that potential issue. In a similar vein, I'm going to go ahead and also jump into the activities contact activity. And down here on the on messages received right here, what I want to do is I want to make sure that I set the progress frame to disappear and I early exit before I check and do all like the add-alls and all that stuff. Basically the same thing. More or less, actually, we already do that here. We already early exit if we don't succeed with our request. So all I want to do is take this progress frame, visibility gone, and move it to the top. Now the problem, like I said before, if there was an error with the response, the progress frame would have otherwise never disappeared, which would be problematic because then the user can no longer interact with the activity. Next up, I want to go ahead and jump into my pending contacts request fragment, and I just want to fix up this method a little bit. I do want to basically do the exact same thing that I've done with those other guys. Now, the first thing, of course, is I want to do my scheduler.invokeOnResume, passing in contacts get contact request response. And we do this so that we're not doing anything with our UI if the activity is paused, and then I'm going to paste everything in there. Now, of course, since we took this code and we're stuffing it inside of a method inside of an anonymous inner class, we have to make sure that anything we access is marked as final, and that includes this parameter. Now that we've done that, I want to go ahead and I'm just going to remove this response.showErrorToast line completely and have the first thing be our progress frame disappearing. And then after that, I'll say, if not, response did succeed. And then I'll say response.showErrorToast. However, for the context here, because we're inside of a closure, I need to access the this from the enclosing object or the enclosing class, which is pending contact request fragment.this. And that's what we're doing for the context. And then we'll go ahead and return true. Now, when I said all of that, I was lying. I actually meant we're using getActivity because we're in a fragment, not an activity. I should have gotten a hint that we're in a fragment because, you know, it's actually named fragment at the end there. Anyway, so we want to make sure we invoke the getActivity method, which we don't have to qualify because all of those parent super methods are in the same scope. All right. So that is our pending contact request fragment. The last thing, the last like real critical bug that I want to address here is going to be under our views camera preview. And the issue with here is I didn't account for the surface being destroyed and recreated. I didn't account for that at all. I just kind of assumed that there will only ever be one surface holder here, and that was a not well-placed assumption. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to slightly change up the code so it's just a little bit more resilient for orientation changes and pausing and unpausing of the activity. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by going all the way to the top here and taking the final modifier off my surface holder. So like I said, what I want to be able to accomplish with these edits here is to allow our surface view to receive or to get a refreshed surface holder in the case that the surface is recreated. So I'm going to remove the final modifier, and what that does is it allows me to edit this field throughout the class and not just inside the constructor. And after I do that, I'm going to jump down to the surface created method, and I'm going to modify this a little bit. For the first couple lines here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, if our surface holder does not equal the holder that was passed in, so if there's a new surface holder available, then I'm going to go ahead and just treat it as the new one. So I'm going to say surface holder equals holder, and then I'm going to say surface holder dot add callback this. So that will make it refresh that particular bit of data. Now let's jump into our surface destroyed. So our surface destroyed, it's no longer the assumption that once the surface destroyed method is called, the surface view is done. So we have to make it a little bit more resilient by releasing our surface and potentially stopping our preview, which we do down there, but also making sure we set certain things to null. So what I am going to do here is I am going to remove this secondary condition. So it's just if camera equals null, and then you'll see why I did that in a second, because I'm going to reset is surface created back to false, and I'm going to say surface holder equals null. But of course, before we set surface holder to null, we definitely want to do surface holder dot remove callback this, and otherwise we might get a nice little memory leak there. And after we do that, the last thing I want to do is right after we stop the preview, I want to set camera to null and camera info to null. Now, while we're doing some of these refactorings and I'm editing files that have already been written, one quick little thing that you might notice on the left-hand side that might help with you guys following along is IntelliJ will actually be very helpful here and actually show us the lines that have been changed or added based on the Git history. So as you can see, the lines that have been changed since the last time I did a commit are highlighted on the left, which last time I did a Git commit was in the last video, as I do one every video. So you can use that to make quickly see what's been changed so far. Anyway, I think that's pretty much all I want to do in the camera preview, and I would consider that to be basically all of our critical bugs addressed. So the next thing that I want to do before we hop into our main activities, I do want to add a couple features, and I do want to add a couple requests to our service layer so that our service layer is completely, all the request response pairs are implemented before we are ready to finish out the app. So yeah, I guess we'll see you guys in the next video.